The Borderlands franchise is known for its many different guns. They've got guns that shoot the whole mag instantly, guns that explode in your hands, guns with legs, guns that talk to you, guns that just kill everything. There's a lot of guns. And through all of these guns, one rule persists, mostly. The more rare it is, the better the gun. Well, it's your Borderlands 3, but we're not talking about that. These rarities span from white weapons being extremely common to legendary and pearlescent weapons, all being very rare, but also all being fully unique, purposely crafted weapons. I've already gone over all those in my Borderlands rarities video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the elusive and very sought after weapon type that is even above those, the hybrid weapons. So, what's going on? I'm Cashew, and this is the wacky world of Borderlands' hybrid guns. Hybrids are an exclusive, accidental mechanic in Borderlands 1. It's only ever been a thing for Borderlands 1 because of how the game's part system works. In its sequels, like Borderlands 2, the part that defines every gun is its barrel. The Maggie has the Maggie barrel, the Skullmasher has the Skullmasher barrel, etc. But in Borderlands 1, the gun defining part varies on every gun. For example, while a gun like the unique TK's Waves defining part is its barrel, a gun like the Bulldog's is its magazine. This leads to extremely rare instances where two of these defining parts can drop on a single gun, combining both of their special effects in one. These are hybrid guns, and they are some of the best weapons in the franchise. And some of them are kind of lame too, I guess, but we'll get to it. In total, there are 10 hybrid weapons across the game, 4 of which only being available in the General Knox DLC. All of these are so extremely rare to the point where most of the drop rates are still not 100% known to this day. The drop rates are especially hard to figure out as hybrids are an accidental mechanic, meaning that no concrete drop rate is laid out in the code for us to find. We need to do a lot of math to properly figure it out, and I'm not the guy for that job. Hybrids are even more of an anomaly than that would lead you to believe though, because of how dedicated drops in Borderlands 1 work. Dedicated drops in Borderlands 1, apart from a few outliers, are non-existent in the traditional sense. Every dedicated farm is guaranteed to drop 100% of the time. Apart from quest rewards though, that later go back into specific bosses' loot pools after the player is level 50 or above. Hybrids can spawn on both of these types, also meaning that particular hybrids can drop as quest rewards if lucky enough. But that's enough specifics for now. Let's get into the meat of the video, the hybrids themselves. Since I briefly touched on it before, let's start with the TK's Wave Bulldog hybrid. As stated, this combines the Wave's barrel with the Bulldog's magazine. This amounts to being an identical version of the TK's Wave, just with 20 mag size. As far as hybrids go, this is probably the most boring. The extra mag does make it better, technically, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's still a TK's Wave. A weapon with a bullet spread so wide that all the pellets rarely hit the target. It's not really that useful, but definitely a cool early game collector's item. If you want to farm one, you can get it from read-only farming the quest TK's Life on Limb, or farming the boss Scar in the Skag Gully, who has a lower chance to drop it since he can only drop the TK's Wave 10% of the time. Easiest way to tell if you got the hybrid is just looking at the item card and focusing on the mag size. If it's 20, you got the hybrid. Next, we have the Bone Shredder Savior. This combines the Bone Shredder's magazine with the Savior's body. This results in a Bone Shredder with the Savior's passive effect, being constant ammo regen. An overall great synergy as the Bone Shredder, while an overall decent weapon, does use a lot of ammo. This effect makes the gun a much better pick as it can be used by Lilith's mercenary build to great effect, along with the rest of the cast getting great use out of it as a secondary weapon when ammo is otherwise low. There is only one way to get this hybrid, and that is by farming one from Bonehead. Bonehead drops the normal Bone Shredder 100% of the time in his camp next to Firestone, making this one of the easier hybrids to farm. Not to say that it's easy at all, they're still incredibly unlikely to drop, this one's just slightly easier than others. Best way to tell if you got the hybrid is to grab it and shoot it if the ammo regenerates. That one's the hybrid. Just make sure if you're Lilith, you're not also wearing a mercenary comm that gives ammo regen when you use it. Now we have one of the hybrids that probably most of you already know about, the Dove Hornet. You might remember the several month-long journey that I recently went on to farm this one. The Dove Hornet combines the Dove's infinite ammo barrel with the Hornet's accessory. This makes a slightly below average Hornet with fixed parts and infinite ammo. It's a really cool passive effect to gain on the gun, and the Hornet is a pretty good choice. While not the absolute best gun in the game, the Hornet's focus on corrosive damage over time is super good because of how corrosion works in Borderlands 1. For those who don't know, corrosion acts as both an effective element to armored enemies, plus a general debuff that makes enemies take more damage. sort of like a prototype of Slag from Borderlands 2. This combined with the infinite ammo lets characters with fire rate buffs take heavy advantage of the gun with no downsides. Builds like a heavy gunner Roland with Metal Storm or a Plague Bearer Lilith in particular work really well. To get the Dove Hornet, you need to farm the quest reward of the final part of the Alter Ego mission chain, being the quest Alter Ego Godless Monsters. Really farming it from the quest is the best way to get it, but if you're insane or have something to prove, like me, you can farm the gun from Slither, the boss the side quest is named after. Like all side quest weapons, the Dove itself will only drop from its dedicated boss 10% of the time when you're over level 50, making it much harder to farm than other methods of farming. Some good news though is that the Dove Hornet is one of the easiest guns to see if it dropped or not. You don't need to search for a specific part or effect. You'll know you got it when instead of a unique Dove dropping, you'll get a legendary Hornet. And obviously to make extra sure, you can just shoot it to see if it has infinite ammo. Something I will mention about this hybrid though is that it no longer exists in the Borderlands remaster, Borderlands Enhanced. Just yet another reason to be disappointed by it, right? This is the only hybrid this happened for, so I think it must have been a thing where Blind Squirrel was cleaning up the code for the remaster, and they must have just fixed a bug that allowed the hybrid to happen. That's not confirmed or anything, that's just my personal speculation, but hey, at least we still have the original game to farm for it in. The next hybrid we'll be talking about was one of the longest to get footage of it dropping in game. I'm of course talking about the Reaver's Edge penetrator. This combines the Reaver's Edge's scope with the penetrator's barrel, meaning that the gun acts as a fully automatic Reaver's Edge sniper. These synergize great together, with the Reaver's extra mag size, +4 element level, and the penetrator's built-in 150% bonus fire rate buff, as well as just making the gun automatic. This allows the gun to just shred enemies and bosses. It works really well with a lot of builds. I'd say every character can get some use out of it. Mordecai and Lilith both have their sniper builds respectively, and Roland can get pretty good use out of it with a heavy gunner comp. Rick is the only one I'm not really sure if it'd be worth it or not, but the hybrid can come in every element, so technically, if you were like super ultra mega insane, you could farm an explosive one specifically for his Blastmaster build. I mean, hell, it's one of my go-to weapons for fighting Craw. You know, if I didn't have to farm it. And yeah, the Reaver's Edge penetrator is quite annoying to farm. First, you'll need to get the quest Two Wrongs Make a Right after completing the missing person side quest first. The actual farm though is just really long. Reaver is at the end of a gauntlet in Crumbs Canyon that you'll need to run through for every run. Thankfully, Reaver does drop the Reaver's Edge every time, as it is a BL1 dedicated, but the hybrid will be harder to get than others just because of how long the runs take. You'll know you've got the hybrid when you hold down the fire button and the gun shoots automatically. A regular Reaver's Edge is semi-automatic and will only fire once if you hold down the trigger. On the opposite side of the spectrum though, we have the Rhino Roaster, a combination between the Rhino's barrel and the Roaster's body. This creates a roaster with the Rhino's unique effect of its projectiles constantly exploding while traveling. Sadly, I don't even like this effect on the Rhino, or the pyrophobia when they brought it back in Borderlands 2, or the cryophobia when they brought it back in the pre-sequel. It being on the roaster doesn't make it any better. The effect has always felt like more of a novelty than something you could actually use practically in game. It makes the hybrid itself more of a collector's item, as you're not going to get any use for it outside of that. All that being said though, if you still want to farm one for some reason, you can get it from Taylor Cobb in Janestown. Fastest way to farm it is to fast travel to the Cauldron in the Roscommons East, then run straight to where Taylor spawns. This is where to tell if you got one or not is to fire the gun and see if the shot detonates multiple times while traveling. Continuing the trend of lackluster hybrids, we have the Friendly Fire Boomstick. This has the Boomstick's barrel combined with the Friendly Fire's accessory. Together, they create a slightly more accurate boomstick. All the Friendly Fire's accessory does is this accuracy change, as well as changing the card to say that it's fire, but it isn't. This hybrid weapon, besides having its name and rarity changed, is barely different from a normal boomstick. What I think the accessory should do is change the boomstick's firing pattern to a smiley face, as that's the Friendly Fire's unique effect. But maybe since the boomstick fires rockets and not bullets, it just ignores it? I'm not sure. But what I do know is that the gun is pretty arse. The weapon is fine for mobbing, or even as far as good if you're brick, but in all scenarios, the Friendly Fire Boomstick is just awful at bossing and does barely any damage. Probably the hybrid that I'm least likely to try and farm myself, as the gun itself isn't really worth it, and that's further highlighted by the farm to get it. The Boomstick drops from Baron Flint, who sits at the top of his drill Thor. To farm it, you need to spawn in at the Salt Flats, spawn a car, drive to his camp, fight your way to a slow elevator, ride said slow elevator, then use a few grenade jumps to ignore the rest of the mobbing before you can finally get to Flint. And remember, you have to do that every run. For a hybrid that is barely different from a normal drop. You can tell if it did drop super easily though, as instead of a blue or purple boomstick, Flint will drop a legendary friendly fire. And that's all for the base game hybrids. At this point, it's about a 50% success rate on them. While the Dove Hornet, Bone Shredder Savior, and Reaver's Edge Penetrator are all amazing, the 3 remaining got the short end of the stick, as their bonus effects are barely usable. We'll see if this trend continues as we move on into the Nox DLC. The first one in the DLC is what I'd say is the most obscure hybrid in the game, the Chikito Amigo Protector. This combines the not very well-known Chikito Amigo with an equally not as talked about legendary, the Protector. This combines the Chikito Amigo's barrel with the Protector's body, amounting in a Chikito Amigo with ammo regen, plus 30% fire rate, plus 3 element level if it has one, and 80% more recoil. For a hybrid that is obscure as this, it's really surprising that it's just all around amazing. For those who aren't aware, the Chikito Amigo on its own is a pretty decent repeater pistol, but with all the buffs the Protector gives it, it's way better. As always, heavy gunner roll-ons can get a lot of use out of it, along with Lilith depending on what element you roll on it. But of course, the far and away best character for it is a Mordecai with a gunslinger comp. If you get it with corrosion, I'd say it's even better for it than the Dove Hornet. But besides being a hybrid with 2 relatively niche guns, what makes it so obscure? And that's its farm. Being in the DLC in BL1 means that you have no fast travel and that you have to drive all the way to where you want to farm for every run. The Chikito Amigo is gotten from completing the side quest Purple Juice in the Sunken Sea. This quest reward is the only way to get the hybrid, as there is no dedicated boss for the gun. So you'll have to read-only farm the quest if you want to plan on getting one. But respawning at T-Bone and having to drive all the way there is going to take about 4.5 minutes each run. Possibly worth it if you're a die-hard Borderlands 1 player, since it is a pretty great weapon, but it's such a time sink compared to other similar hybrids like the Bone Shredder Savior. While you do have to read-only farm to get it, at least it's easy to tell when you do. The gun will remain blue or purple Chikito Amigo, but the card will have ammo regen on it. Just look for that and you're golden. The next hybrid is the Cyros' Power Cyclops. This can be farmed from Commander Cyros during the side quest, This Bitch's Payback, but not after. If you hand in the quest, Cyros will not respawn, which is a lot worse when you realize that part 2 of this quest is needed to get a different hybrid. But for now, focusing on Cyros, this hybrid combines the Cyclops' scope with the Cyros' Power's accessory. This makes a Cyros' Power with a huge zoom when aiming down sights, plus more crit damage and projectile speed. It's an all-round decent buff for the Cyros' Power, which already was a pretty decent sniper with its transfusion orbs coming back to heal you after you deal direct health damage. Since it's a sniper, it works best on Mordecai and Lilith's Sniper and Spectre builds respectively. Because of its massive zoom though, it's best at very long distances, which is kind of a con since you're rarely sniping something from a super long way away in Borderlands 1, but it does have its uses. Overall, it's alright, but even with all its buffs, I still wouldn't use it over a Protector, Skullmasher, or Bessie if given the option. This hybrid is one of the harder ones to spot, as it will drop as a seemingly normal Cyros' Power, but with the Cyclops' massive scope. So make sure that you know what it looks like before going out to farm, so that you can make your run slightly faster. But the main thing to check is that on the card, it will have a 3.2 times zoom as the first thing listed. Best way to farm this one is quite slow sadly, as you'll need to spawn in at T-Bone and just drive towards the Sunken Sea and stop at the checkpoint where he spawns. Seeing as we just talked about it, let's get into the hybrid that you get from This Bitch's Payback Part 2. As I said before, to farm this one, you will have to lock that particular character out of the Cyros farm, so be careful. The hybrid in question is the Ajax Ogre, probably the most well-known hybrid in the franchise. This combines the Ajax's spear's barrel with the ogre's accessory, and together they form one of the best weapons in the franchise. The gun functions as an explosive Ajax spear with +4 explosive element and +55% damage. That may not sound like much when I just read out the stats, but that extra explosive output just straight up shreds enemies. The two parts synergize perfectly with each other, as the Ajax spear is a lot more accurate than a regular ogre, and an ogre is a lot more powerful. The Ajax ogre can work in almost every situation the game throws at you on any character, but it does work best with Roland's Rifleman and Heavy Gunner builds, as well as Brick's Blastmaster build being really good also. I mean, on Roland, this gun is pretty much unstoppable with the fire rate and AR buffs. It's great for mobbing, bossing, and just overall most situations. Actually getting one though, that's a different story. This farms sucks. Like other DLC hybrids, it takes a long time to drive out to where you need to farm for it, making the runs go by slow and the progress feeling like it's barely being made. It's a long drive too, longer than the Chikito Amigo farm, which is saying something. I know all this because the Ajax ogre was my first ever hybrid drop. I got it back when I just played the game on Xbox 360, and also got the worst possible roll out of the 3 you can get. But even so, with that worst possible variant, it was still amazing. The Ajax ogre drops from Commander Ajax in the Road's End map. You know you've got it when Ajax drops a legendary ogre instead of a spear. If you have the time and the willpower, I 100% recommend getting one of these, as they are so much fun. And now, the final hybrid in Borderlands 1. The absolute rarest item in Borderlands history. The Nemesis Invader. Just being frank, you're probably not ever going to get this to drop in game. There has only ever been like 4 confirmed drop of this with proof, like ever. The last one of those being the first ever recorded footage of it dropping from Chromarax, really recently by Wamr. Backtracking a bit though, the Nemesis repeater pistol is a pearlescent, the rarest rarity in the franchise. Just getting a normal one once is a time sink that a lot of people just wouldn't do. Now with a hybrid farm onto that, you're starting to see the issue, I think. Those are also made rare by their very limited method of farming, which is 2 options. You can farm Lance chests in the DLC, or farming Chromarax the Invincible. The hybrid itself though combines the Nemesis's accessory with the Invader's scope. For those who might be confused, the Invader is both a repeater and a sniper in Borderlands 1, the hybrid doesn't mix weapon types. What this does is gives the Nemesis, one of the best builds in the game, the Invader's special effect. That being, when you shoot it once while aiming down sights, you fire the entire mag with 250% bonus fire rate. Sort of like a chopper, but only while aiming down sights. This makes the already amazing gun even better. The Nemesis itself already does great shock damage over time, as well as having a chance to have corrosive bullets spawn around the main one. The Nemesis Invader works on every character and most builds. I suppose if I had to pick one as the best, I'd say Mordecai's Gunslinger build, but I'm not exaggerating when I say this weapon is good on everyone. To check if you got the right one, aim down sights and hit the trigger once. If the whole mag fires, you got the hybrid. I honestly love how this gun exists. A gun that a lot of people thought was a myth, also being a gun that follows Borderlands' main rule perfectly. The more rare it is, the better the item. And the Nemesis Invader is both the most rare and one of the best guns in the game's history. And that's every hybrid in Borderlands 1. An amazing mechanic that made the game just a little bit better by giving the player just some really fun gun combos to find and farm. But despite hybrids being something that players really liked and celebrated, they never existed outside of Borderlands 1. Except they actually did. I lied when I said it was exclusive to Borderlands 1 in the beginning, because there are at least 5 hybrids in Borderlands 3. Kinda. Releasing with the Maliwan takedown were a handful of brand new legendaries to drop from the 2 new bosses. The first boss being the Valkyrie squad, who can drop 3 brand new hybrid shields. These new hybrids are not the same as the previous ones though. These new ones were purposely crafted by the devs to have both special effects of each shield in one. These are the Recharge Burner, a combination of the Recharger and Nova Burner shields. It has the effect of the Nova Burner, where on shield break a massive Nova will fire out, but in addition to it, it also has the Recharger special effect, where on shield break, the shield will instantly fully recharge. When the effect is used, it will go on a 20-second cooldown. This makes it so you basically just get 3 Novas and a lot of survivability, making it, at least at the time of its release, one of the better legendary shields in the game. Of course, that's not really the case now with some of the DLC shields just being insane, but it's a good shield nonetheless. The next is the Red Card Recharger. Can you guess which 2 shields this combines? It's kind of odd that they use the Recharger for 2 of these, as I'd hope with hybrids returning that there would be, you know, a little bit more variety, but I digress. The shield has the same effect of the Red Card, being that when you slide into an enemy, your shield is fully drained and you do damage equal to how much shield was lost. This being combined with the Recharger though, does let you make sort of a playstyle out of it, where you couldn't really with a base red card. But to be honest, I think picking the red card for the combo was just kind of a lame decision, as it's just not very good and it's really situational. The shield overall is fine, but I never go out of my way to use it. And the next purposely made hybrid in Borderlands 3 is the Snowshoe, which combines the Frozen Heart with the Red God. I mean, this is even more egregious than the recharge you're getting 2 spots for this, since at least that was like a good shield with a positive effect. The red card is just a pretty bad shield on its own, and its special effect is nothing really to write home about. That being said though, this is much better than the other red card hybrid. First off, all damage the shield does, including the slide damage from the red card portion, is cryo. And on top of that, it has the frozen hearts effect of having a cryo nova on shield break that heals 30% of the damage dealt. This does actually give a good reason to go out of your way to slide into enemies, and kind of does them out in a pretty fun shield. Nowhere near the best the game has to offer nowadays, but at least it's fun. The final that I'd like to mention here is the Void Rift, another unique legendary shield, but this time found in DLC 2. It combines the effects of the Impaler and Black Hole shields that amounts to a void sucking in enemies on shield break followed by a nova, as well as firing cryo spikes out whenever you take damage, but I'm not going to go into this more than that just because you already get the picture at this point. This is kind of what I meant by hybrids kind of returned. Borderlands 3 had purposely made the hybrids and had them all as shields instead of guns. The combos are kind of fun, but there is a noticeable lack of variety with what's on display here. These were all the purposely made hybrids in Borderlands 3, but that's not all the hybrids. It's not very well known, but a true hybrid weapon was found inside Borderlands 3, a weapon that fans dubbed the Seventh Ghost. This mystery weapon was discovered and later heavily researched by a user named Seraphaz in 2021. There is a lot to unpack with this weapon, so just stay with me here. Some of you may know that the Seventh Sense is a unique weapon that you can use during the Cold Case missions in Borderlands 3's second DLC. You may also know that from completing those missions, you get a legendary version of the weapon that acts slightly differently. The hybrid, despite its name and game being the Seventh Sense, is neither of these. The only thing it has in common with the Seventh Sense is that you can see the hidden walls in DLC 2 side quests with it. But the hybrid is actually closer to a rogue sight, a gun that you can only use during the Goring Rogue story mission, and a King/Queen's Call, which is a legendary that exclusively drops from the final boss, Tyrene the Destroyer. The King's Call, upon hitting a crit, returns 3 ammo into the mag and has 3 orbs ricochet out and seek a target, whether that be the one you got the crit on or an enemy near them. The rogue sight, however, doesn't really have much of a unique touch, as it's only really used to see hidden targets in its story mission, but that effect is not transferred over to the hybrid. The only rogue sight DNA that I can see in the gun is that the bullet's visual effect is the same with a red outline, plus the gun also can't be anointed, just like the mission version of the Seventh Sense. So, how did this gun come to be? Well, it's a similar situation to the Borderlands 1 hybrids, where very specific roll of parts changes the weapon's properties. In the code, the unique barrel that makes the hybrid is called the Seventh Ghost, and it is not supposed to drop in game. My current theory is that the Seventh Ghost variant of the gun was basically like a placeholder for the Seventh Sense before it was properly added into the side quest. I think that makes the most sense, as the King's Call is an alien barrel Jacob's pistol and the Rogue Sight is a mission only Jacob's pistol. Combining the two together would seem to be an easy shortcut before properly implementing the new gun. But that's not confirmed at all, that's just like a personal theory. Even though, like I said, the hybrid isn't supposed to drop in game, it actually can. In true hybrid fashion, if you are extremely lucky, you can get it from the Diamond Key loot room aboard Sanctuary 3. This makes it one of the rarest guns in the game because of how hard it is to gain Diamond Keys. The weapon itself is pretty alright, considering that it can't be anointed. Going through the Malawant takedown with it, it handled everything pretty good. It's definitely not a meta pick by any stretch of the imagination, but it's more than a viable option, especially on Flak. The other 3 characters aren't really gonna synergize with it well, as since to do damage with it, you need to be getting crits constantly. Flak though can take advantage of it wholesale, with Megavore allowing crits on body, plus Fadeaway just being a blessing to a gun like this. But for real this time, those are all of the hybrids in Borderlands history. They are a really awesome mechanic, whether accidental or not, and I'd love to see them return in their more traditional sense. But that's the thing, the traditional ways a hybrid came to be are complete accidents due to the part system. It wouldn't really be the same if Gearbox made their own in-game, because they'd most likely not be as rare as we'd want them to be, and they would have to be at least semi-balanced. I'd love to hear your take on them, because I can see people having a lot of different takes on how they should bring hybrids back. Ideally for me, they followed Borderlands 1's example, with only having a handful of hybrids, but having them all super powerful, dropping from very specific, rare, dedicated sources. I can imagine all the possible combos, like an Interfacer Heartbreaker or a Shamiami Pimpernel or even something like a Tsunami Gutsman. I don't know, the possibilities even with the restrictions in mind are seemingly endless. But thank you all so much for watching. Any support you're willing to give me, whether it's a like or a sub, is just really appreciated. With all that being said though, thank you so much again for watching, and let's get into the channel member shoutouts. My channel members are JBH, who goes around robbing people's houses just to steal their 10-cent cans so he can get a massive payday. Wesker520, who is the first one to be picked in every schoolyard pick they've ever done, even for sports they've never even played before. Angel B, who is one of the best strategic minds of our generation. They came up with electoral votes. Jimmy Scrimpy, who can exclusively sing in a high C note but cannot go lower. Jane H, who is going to be the next Jaquise Laurentop, the first ever person to eat ham. I don't know what that means, but you know, whatever they put their mind to, they usually succeed at, so I guess we'll find out. Noah Rollins, who could name all people named John. I mean, you got John, and then John, oh, you can't forget John. Oh, and then there was this other guy you met named John. Handsome Frank 63, who can hold their breath for a whole 8 minutes before getting bored. They could go longer if they wanted to go till they pass out, but they don't got time for that. Tryptophan, who solved the Martian air crisis. I had no idea there was one going on, but I am very relieved to hear that it's solved. Nevertheless Raven, who can read Braille, but only by looking at it, hasn't really got the whole feeling thing yet. Koi Cadaver, who you already know is going to be one of the world's most wanted. Like nothing's happened yet, but we're fairly confident. Mr. TX01, who buys billboards and puts out random ads as a hobby. Last thing they did with them was showed a picture of himself doing various crimes in different poses. The jury's still out on whether that was a good idea or not. And Mickey4, who can move his soul out of his body into any inanimate objects. It sounds a lot better in theory than in practice. My guy just like is a toaster. Can't even toast without someone pushing his buttons. It sucks. But thank you all so much for this extra support. Like, it means so much. Like, thank you so much. But if anyone watching wants to also become a channel member, the join button is right below the video. You'll get a shout out like this, as well as like a badge in the comments. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.